Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the second episode of the Deep Six Podcast, coming to you from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm your host, Steven Spivak, joined again today by my brother and co-host, Dan. Dan, how are you today?
I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm good, but before we get started, I'd like to make a little show note to the people listening at home. As some of you may know, we do advertise a third co-host on this show, Mr. Matt Barnes. Unfortunately, Matt couldn't join us for the first episode. Again, Matt is not here today. But Matt has some stuff going on in his personal life that he needs to get sorted out and get through. And then hopefully, once that's taken care of, Matt will be able to join us here on the show on the Deep Six Podcast. On that note, I'd like to say to those listening, welcome. Welcome to the second episode. You may be listening to us through iTunes. You may be listening to us through the Google Play Music Store. Yeah, we're on both now. We're also on Stitcher Radio. You may be listening to us there. You may even be listening to us on YouTube. And, of course, to find us on all of those platforms, all you have to do is go to said platform of your choosing and search the Deep Six Podcast. Of course, I also invite you all to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, where else are we? Instagram.
Snapchat.
Everything except the Snapchat.
Tinder. Oh, wait, no. That one's wrong.
Everything except the Snapchat is at Deep Six Podcast, all spelled out one word. The Snapchat name is the Deep Six Podcast, and if you go to our website or our Facebook or our Instagram or our Twitter, you'll find our Snap code there. You can add us that way as well. But yeah, here we are, the second episode. It's been about 2 weeks since we last graced the audience with our lovely voices.
Has it been that long?
Yes, it has. And that will be a thing. We will be a every other week podcast for the time being. But Dan, why don't we catch the audience up at home at how you've been over the last 2 weeks, how I've been. Anything exciting going on for you?
Pokemon Go.
I think that's been what's been going on with everyone over the last couple days.
Pokemon Go. I cannot believe this game. And I say that not because it's the most amazing thing I've ever come across, but I say that because I cannot believe how many people are playing Pokemon Go.
Yeah, we were out just last night walking around at about 9 o'clock, 9:30.
About 9, yeah, it's about 9:30, because I was trying to catch a Ponyta, and the Ponyta never got any closer. I kept telling Steve we were going in the wrong direction, but he didn't believe me. But I just think the app wasn't working because
after
we got
a while
we just
quite a bit and couldn't get certain Pokestops to work, even though we were right on top of them. So,
well, screw not getting Pokestops to work. I couldn't even get into the damn app last night.
Yeah.
So the Ponyta got away. But I will find a Ponyta. Don't you worry your little butts.
But while we were out just last night, and I don't want to say a very busy town, but we saw about at least 9 other people playing this game
in a 2-block radius.
Yeah, and just a couple block radius, exactly.
We're not talking like downtown Philly where there's like thousands of people. We're talking 9:30 at night in a small town just outside of Philly, where there's like nothing. Everything's closed at 9 o'clock at night, and there's like a park that's dark and has no lights, and a train station that has a train go through it every 40 minutes or so. So these are just people. Now, granted, I saw a few of these people get in their cars and drive away, so they might have been from neighboring places, but...
Well, just this past weekend, I wound up, taking the regional rail up to the mall, and I was playing Pokemon all the way there. But at the mall, there's multiple Pokestops, and there were people literally, I think, just about, I don't want to say just about everyone, but about 3/4 of the people at the mall on a Saturday afternoon were playing Pokemon. And there was actually one point where a lure was set off at one of the Pokestops within the mall, and it became almost a Pokemon Go meetup. It was fantastic.
This world is being overrun by Pokemon, and I don't say that just in the sense of, oh, look, there's a Pokemon on my floor or on my leg or sitting in my trash can. I mean that as in literally everybody I know is playing this game.
And it's awesome because it's getting people up and out. Me especially. I have been injured over the last, I want to say it's been 9 months. It's been since September. I've lost count. But I haven't been doing a whole lot. And this game has got me up off the couch and got me out walking around. And I'm not even realizing how far I'm walking around because I'm catching Pokemon. And it's fantastic.
Well, let's be honest. You're not very active even when you're not hurt. But if you do come across Steve somewhere outside, please give him a hug and say we're happy to see you because outdoors is a very, very strange concept to Steven, and I don't think he quite grasped it yet at this point in his life. I think it's going to take a few more years and a few more Pokemon, but we'll see how this goes. It's a work in progress.
Hey, listen here. It took some work to get you up off the couch to go find that Ponyta last night.
Man, Raw was on, even though Raw sucks these days. But Raw was on. I'm tired, I had been running around, taking people places all day. I like to relax at the end of the night.
Let's talk about the Pokemon Go experience we had the other night.
Which one was that?
When we saw the car accident up around the corner.
Well, I don't really want to get into people's personal lives.
No, but I'll go as far as to say that there is a Pokemon gym up the street from us.
Disclaimer before the story starts. The guy playing Pokemon did not cause the accident.
Yes.
So don't freak out. Don't go, complaining or something like that. The guy playing Pokemon was completely being safe, following every rule and law in this tiny little town outside of Philadelphia that I won't name.
But there's a Pokemon gym right up the street from us. It is a church, as most are. And when we were coming home the other night, we saw this gentleman standing outside of his car, obviously playing Pokemon Go, as we've seen multiple people standing just outside of said church, staring down at their phones.
It's funny. The family that owns that church lives there. It's just weird to think that people are just chilling. I mean, I know it's a church, don't get me wrong, but it's just weird to think people are chilling outside of people's houses and just like, yeah, I'm going to take over your house. And they're like, well, I own this house.
But it's not malicious.
No, it's not malicious. I just think I think it's interesting. I'm not saying that they're doing anything wrong.
But back to the situation that we encountered. The gentleman was standing outside of his parked car trying to take over this gym. And we actually passed him, and I'm like, I bet that's what he's doing. So we actually circled around the block, and we were going to go talk to him.
Oh, see, now we sound like the creeps. Now we sound malicious.
We were going to go talk to him and
tell him to back the hell off because that's our gym.
Team Valor for life. But we circle back around, and by the time we get back, we see a car had hit him.
There's a car just in the middle of the street with its lights off. Now, granted, this is like 11 o'clock at night almost, because we had gone to Dairy Queen.
No, this was only about 10 o'clock because we were on our way back from Dairy Queen. We were trying to get back for the UFC fight.
Oh, true. Well, yeah, okay. So, yeah. So but this is like 10 o'clock at night.
It's not a very busy road. It's a side road. It's a residential road.
Speed limit's 25 miles an hour.
But just based off the damage, this guy literally hit the backside of this guy's SUV, bumped him up on the curb, took off his back wheel on his driver's side, and messed up his front passenger wheel, and smashed his windshield in as well.
And the scariest part about it was this guy's literally, collided with this SUV sitting on the side of the road. And he's trying to drive away. He's trying to get in his car and drive away, and the car ain't going anywhere. And I'm coming down the street. I'm like, what the hell's going on? And I'm thinking to myself, number one, what the hell's going on here? And number two, why the hell is he trying to get away? It was
crazy. And it was also kind of crazy to think that this guy might have been flying down this road on a Saturday night with his headlights off, possibly drunk. That was never made clear.
He could have hit me.
It could have been us.
Be honest.
And not to wish bad upon anyone else, but I'm glad he hit a parked car and not us.
How many Pokemon Go drivers can this guy hit in one night? He was trying to find out. Maybe that was his thing. Maybe he knew the guy was trying to take his gym, and he's like, I'm going to hit that guy with my car. But, that sounds awful. I don't encourage that. Please don't drive
we
and
do
hunt
not
people
condone
down.
The hunting down of fellow Pokemon Go players so they do not take your gyms.
Please do not hit people with your cars while they're trying to take your gym. That is a very, very bad idea.
But back to Pokemon Go. Unfortunately, this gentleman did not win the gym.
Because he had to deal with his fucking car.
And,
I think that is why.
The police showed up and all that stuff. But But yeah, it's getting people up. It's getting people out. It's
Meanwhile, we sit
healing
here
the
and
handicap.
Meanwhile, does it have those powers? I haven't heard about those powers yet, but
I say that in the sense that of my injuries, I haven't been doing much actively, but I've been getting up and going out to play Pokemon.
all right, please don't compare yourself to being handicapped.
It was a joke, and if I offended anyone, I apologize. But yeah, Pokemon Go has but to not harp on that too long.
This is not an episode about Pokemon Go. I
No,
promise.
it isn't. But anything else interesting happened over the last 2 weeks for you, Dan?
I started a job, not a very fancy job.
No, you did mention that on the first episode, though, that you are starting a job, or you have started a job with Giant Food Stores. How is that going for you? Still haven't
good.
brought me home any Ecto Cooler, which I will punch you in the face for later. But
I told you the other day, I think we're out of it because the shelves are empty and there's none of it in the back. So if you want to somehow supply us with Ecto Cooler, maybe I'll bring it home.
Quick note for those listening who have not
Send us Ecto Cooler.
Yes, please send us Ecto Cooler. We will put the address and the information below. But for those of you who have not been able to find it, in our area, it's abundant in ShopRite stores, from what I've been able to tell. And apparently any grocer can get it. And I've also noticed that cans are showing up at Giant stores, which is what I had Dan look for specifically the other night.
Yes, while I was at work, it was 9 o'clock at night. I wanted to come home, and he's like, "Find me cans of Ecto Cooler." I'm like, I haven't seen them anywhere.
But the job's going well?
Yeah, the job's going well. You mentioned how Pokemon Go gets you out and exercising. You should see my step counters.
You should get a job.
Yeah, right? You should see my step counters after a day, after a 6-hour shift at Giant.
Well, I assume once the Pokemon Go servers are working, you're going to just fire up the app and probably get an external battery and just keep it in your pocket so you can hatch all those eggs.
Sure. Yeah. But yeah, constantly lifting 20-pound bags of ice and 10-pound things of water and whatever else all day. I'm getting buff, man.
Water. There's that Philly accent.
Buff is the stuff, and I'm getting buff.
I didn't know Buff Bagwell was a co-host of the Deep Six podcast over here.
Well, I ain't that buff yet, but
I don't know. After this job in Pokemon Go, you're gonna be fit AF, right?
Sure. Just for those who are interested, if you are an Amazon Prime member, I just did a quick Google search since we were talking about this. If you are an Amazon Prime member, you can get a 12-pack of Hi-C Ecto Cooler citrus juice, aka Ecto Cooler, cans for a little bit more than $7. And
but the thing is, it becomes part of Amazon Pantry, and there's a $5.99 shipping fee that goes on top of that. But that is a flat fee for filling your entire Amazon Pantry box. I was looking at it this morning.
I mean,
but it's also available on Walmart.com when it comes in stock.
Or you can buy it without Prime for $40.
Yeah, people are jacking up the prices. But let's get to the actual topic of today's show.
The topic of today's show.
And that topic would be the upcoming WWE draft. Here it is, Tuesday, July 12th. Last night on Raw, Mr. McMahon came out to announce that Stephanie will be taking control of Raw while Shane will be taking control of SmackDown as commissioners. And they've both been given the task of finding general managers for their show.
Can we just talk about what an absolute shock, a.k.a. not a shock, that Stephanie and Shane are getting control of Raw and SmackDown?
Well, I kind of think they that's kind of been the idea the whole time. But I think the shock came when they're like, find a general manager. So it's like, okay, well, here's where we're going to get you. You think you've got, it all figured out, but now you got to speculate who's going to become the general manager.
Little do they know I still have it all figured out. And we'll get to that.
So let's talk about that for a second. Who do you speculate the general managers being?
Oh, there ain't no speculation. Raw general manager is going to be Triple H. SmackDown general manager is going to be Daniel Bryan.
Daniel Bryan.
Yes.
Seriously.
And here's why I say that. Stephanie gets control of Raw again. Now, here's my quick little spiel. I'll try to make this as quick as I can. Stephanie gets Raw again. Oh, the authorities got Raw, blah, blah, blah. They're going to draft all the guys that are already well known. Shane is going to have SmackDown. He's going to take all the guys that are part of this quote-unquote new era. who's perfect to run the old guard for Stephanie? Triple H. Who's perfect to run this new era of guys that has gone against Triple H and the Authority in the past?
Yeah,
Daniel Bryan.
It comes back to that, I guess, that dynamic of Daniel Bryan versus the Authority. But I don't know. I'm gonna put a little wishful thinking in here. I think Stone Cold might wind up being a part of this.
No.
And this is just me, what I would like to see. I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm not saying this is likely to happen. I would like to see Stone Cold put in here. He won't run Raw. Might be able to see Stone Cold run SmackDown.
How would he run SmackDown?
As the general manager.
What is your ideal way of him running SmackDown?
Being the general manager of SmackDown.
I mean, more so like, what would you like him to do? Do you think he's going to go out there and be like, yeah, I want these guys to fight, and I want these guys to do this, and then boom, boom, boom?
Well, here's the other thing.
Or do you want him to just be like, oh, you suck, Stunner. Oh, you suck, Stunner. Like, do you want him to actually like have control, or just kind of be like a figurehead?
I think they've been toying with us a lot about the idea of a general manager returning.
Well,
we haven't seen Eric Bischoff, which is, I don't want to say peculiar, but might see Eric Bischoff have a hand in this come this next episode of Raw.
Well, here's something fun that I saw on the internet about 30 minutes before we started recording this podcast. In the Raw recap for last night, WWE posted, it was just, talking about the different segments that happen on Raw. And one of the things says...
Is this a possible spoiler warning?
Yes, spoiler warning.
Not necessarily a spoiler warning, but a possible leak.
Possible.
So this, if you don't want to know this information, as you might be spoiled to the upcoming events of WWE
Mute us for like
Draft.
the next minute.
Mute us for the next couple seconds or fast forward. All right, and there's your fair warning, Dan. What were you going to say?
Well, the one part, it talks about, it's talking about how former GMs and everything else have come back and say, hey, we want control of SmackDown, and how Mr. McMahon said, okay, well, Shane gets SmackDown, Stephanie gets Raw, you now have to pick general managers. Well, the title of that subsection of the Raw recap was titled, because they have changed it since, The Yes Movement Takes Over SmackDown Live. And there is not a single mention of Daniel Bryan in the paragraph.
So this is a recap from where?
From WWE.
Interesting.
The screenshot I saw posted was from the app, and there has been an updated screenshot since it has changed. Let me see if I can pull that back up. But yeah, so I don't want to say that that's a 100% spoiler, but that does go into the speculation that a lot of people have been saying as to where Daniel Bryan could be becoming the general manager of.
It would be very interesting to see that while Daniel is still hosting the Cruiserweight Classic as well.
The new title of that subsection, now that I pulled it up, now says Mr. McMahon named SmackDown Commissioner. Exclamation point. So they're screaming.
Well, who knows? I mean, this might also be what the plan was to put Daniel Bryan in there, and now that that's leaked, I don't know if the leak is big enough.
They're not going to change
things.
They're not going to change their minds.
It's happened before
with Daniel Bryan of all people.
So I don't know about that.
Also, a guy who writes for a wrestling website last night posted something along the lines of, if the current plan for Vince McMahon to reveal the SmackDown general manager is true, he will be #GOAT, a.k.a. greatest of all time, if you don't understand what that means. So I think people would really like Daniel Bryan as the general manager, and I know WWE wants to keep him around.
So do you think that's what this upcoming episode of Raw is going to be? Is going to be who's going to be the general managers, and they're going to toy with us all night about it until they reveal it?
I think the bigger surprise is who is Stephanie going to pick. And I
don't think that's going to be the surprise at all. I'm pretty sure that's going to be Triple H. I think that's going to be his return. We haven't seen Triple H since WrestleMania?
Yep.
So we're going on, 4.5 months at this point?
Hey, he's already the general manager of NXT, okay?
Nope, that's William Regal.
Oh, he's the commissioner. See, they already do this in NXT. Triple H is the commissioner of NXT, but William Regal is the general manager.
I don't know. Whatever happens, it's going to be quite interesting. And if Daniel Bryan returns, I know that I'll have a reason to watch SmackDown every week.
I'll
just
have a
to see
reason
Daniel Bryan on my TV.
I'll have a reason to watch SmackDown every week simply for the fact that I think SmackDown's going to be your quote-unquote indie heaven show.
I don't think they're going to do that.
And Raw's going to be your kind of your usual guys that are already kind of established WWE guys.
Real quick before we end this out here, I want to make note on what Shane said to Vince when pleading for the right to run SmackDown, where he wants to bring a new feel, a new look, new camera shots, all of this to the brand. And I'll be very interested to see if that actually happens. I know there's been talks of different stages and whatnot. I want to see what Shane can bring to SmackDown and what they're going to do to create competition for themselves within the WWE.
Everything is going to remain the same, except they're going to come back with the referees in blue shirts.
So Nick Patrick is going to come back as well?
Only if he gets to recreate one of the worst feuds I've ever seen in my life with Earl Hebner, which probably isn't going to happen.
That was pretty awful. So let's get to talking about the actual draft. And I guess we'll start off by kind of discussing who should go as number one, or who, better yet, who do we actually think will go as number one, and who we would like to actually see go as number one.
See, that's an interesting question because you have to go off of who you think is going to have the actual number one overall pick. Do you think it's going to be Raw, or do you think it's going to be SmackDown?
Honestly, with the way they're pushing SmackDown, I think SmackDown might get the first pick.
All right. How do you think they're going to decide that? Do you think they're going to do kind of like a we were kind of talking about it. Do you think they're going to do like a match and like,
Well, that'll be interesting because then it'll be basically like picking your draft pick,
Not necessarily.
I think it might come down to something as simple as rock, paper, scissors or a coin toss.
Or just picking out of a hat, like who gets number one.
Yeah, it might.
Maybe Vince comes out and says, all right, I'm picking a random thing, a random ball or a random piece of paper, and whatever brand is on this piece of paper gets the first overall pick.
Could be that simple.
All right, so let's say because you brought it up, let's say SmackDown gets the first overall pick, right?
Okay.
All right, so who's going number one overall to SmackDown?
If SmackDown gets the first pick, if Shane's running SmackDown, Shane gets to make the pick, not the general manager. I think you might see an AJ Styles because Shane's trying to put a new, fresh, face, new, fresh start, somebody to build a brand behind.
I think
you might also see Dean Ambrose.
I think assuming he's champion after him and Seth Rollins on Monday.
Which he clearly most likely will be.
Yeah, probably.
Because that's just a way of being like, oh, who's going to really be the champion going into the pay-per-view?
Yeah, I think that ends in kind of a screwy finish anyway.
I think Seth is the favorite to be the first draft pick for Raw, too, just because of his relation to the Authority. And
yeah, but Steph said she doesn't care about him anymore.
That's also very true.
All right.
But then again, if Triple H winds up being the general manager and he gets in Stephanie's ear.
Yeah, because we don't know how Triple H feels about Seth at this point. But you mentioned AJ Styles, the SmackDown's number one overall pick. And I think that's probably a good bet for a few reasons. First off being, we've seen him in these matches with, over the last, when he came in the end of January, and it's now almost the end of, the middle of July. And he's been here for just about 6 months now. And over the span of these 6 months, he's had high-quality matches with Chris Jericho, Roman Reigns for the WWE Championship, and John Cena. And not to mention the smattering of matches he's had with guys with like Kevin Owens, Cesaro, etc. on Raws.
Mm-hmm.
He has proven in just these 6 months he has been here that he's capable of being the guy that can lead a brand, especially into this quote-unquote new era where you're starting off fresh, and you want a guy that has the opportunity to essentially carry the torch and lead the way.
So you make a good point about AJ and building a brand behind him. But I think this first pick is going to go based off of this title match. that's happening at Battleground. And I think, I really think Ambrose is going to go to one, Seth's going to go to the other, and that's going to how they're going to determine where the WWE Championship goes, is who wins that match. Because clearly Reigns is not winning that match.
I don't want to say clearly, because I don't think anything's clear at this point, because I'll be honest with you, I have no idea who's walking out of Battleground as champion.
We were talking off, I don't want to say camera because we're not on camera, but we were talking before we started recording, and you had mentioned something about how there's rumors going around through the dirt sheets, and we all know the dirt sheets could be completely made up
the rumor
BS, but
the rumor is, and this kind of goes along with the whole AJ Styles thing, is originally the plan was for John Cena to be kind of the guy on SmackDown and Roman Reigns to be the guy on Raw. Now, this was a month ago when they first announced the draft, and Roman Reigns was still the big guy with the championship and everything else. Now the rumors coming out are saying, well, hold on, we don't necessarily know what we want to do with Roman Reigns now because of the wellness suspension and people kind of souring on him with his push. And now there's a lot of people saying, hey, Seth and AJ should get that chance. And I'm still under the impression that AJ Styles and John Cena feud will continue past Battleground, and that will be your kind of SmackDown title main event match for SummerSlam. Like those two going at it for the title. I think that is going to be your big match on SmackDown.
Well, let's also talk about how there's not been official word yet on what's happening with the championship.
No.
Because I think if you're going to get a split heavyweight championship, then you're going to have to split the Divas championship, which would be interesting, seeing how they just made it, its own standalone title.
You mean the women's championship?
Yes, the women's championship, excuse me. But I think there's not enough women to have two divisions.
Well, that's where you have people from NXT that could get called up and kind of, not necessarily have two titles, but kind of,
and then, let me ask you this. How does, I think we're getting a little too far off track real quick, because I was going to ask, how do call-ups work once there's a brand split? But let's keep on track of this discussion about the title real quick. Do you think they're going to do split championships, or do you think they're going to do like they did with the initial draft, where the champion gets to bounce between shows?
They're going to do split championships.
Okay, because
Joey Styles brought up a really good point probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago. You can't have a whole show and a whole brand where you're not wrestling the guys on Raw and not have a champion. You just can't do it. You're not battling for anything at that point.
But I look at it this way. It's, if you have one champion through the whole company, right, you're going to have, that one spot. Then you're not going to make a championship that looks weaker compared to the other championship. Then you're going to have cross-promotion matches. So say a SmackDown guy is the champion, he can fight a Raw guy, and vice versa. And then it kind of...
But that really toughens things, because then you have this idea of this Raw guy or this SmackDown guy, whoever gets the championship, of having to work more shows and basically be a dual brand guy, and I can't see that happening. I can't see it being... So
then what happens? Okay, I can see that with a main championship.
I mean,
what happens with a women's championship then?
Well, that could be different. That could, and I don't know how they're going to handle that. I'll be completely honest with you. I don't know how they're going to handle that. I still think it's going to be a thing where you have, I think, and I'll be completely honest with you, I think you're going to have a world title for each show, WWE title on one, probably a world heavyweight championships on another. You're going to have Intercontinental on one show, U.S. title on another, and then you're going to have the the women's championship and the tag titles bounce around.
Do you think it might make sense to make, say, the women's division exclusive to one brand, or something along those lines? If you do that,
you have to make the tag team division exclusive to another.
That's very true.
I don't think they're going to make anything exclusive other than the world titles.
So then that means we're going to bring in a second pair of tag team titles.
No. I'm saying I think the women's championship and the tag team championships will be for both shows, but the US and IC will be for their own separate shows, and the World and the WWE will be for their own separate shows.
I don't know. That seems a little redundant.
Where I also say that in the sense of divas won't have to be drafted, or women won't have to be drafted. They're just going to be wherever. They're going to wrestle both shows.
Which also seems really redundant. Because then that's also, I think the women are a big draw to the point where
having them on both shows would be a good idea.
I don't know that
There's
makes
also
sense.
the possibility that, yes, we get a second women's championship, but it looks just like the other one. And
I don't know. I think the title thing really remains to be seen, and I think that going back to my original point that this match coming up at Battleground is going to determine where, if they decide to split the title, where the championship is going to land.
I think
this draft.
I think having Battleground a few days after the draft itself will determine where a lot of these titles end up. Tag team titles aren't on the line, so wherever New Day goes, that's where the belts will go. But you have
but if New Day gets split,
what I'm saying is, say, all right, so you have Zack Ryder versus Rusev that was announced last night. So say Zack Ryder goes to SmackDown, Rusev stays on Raw. It could be a whole sense of, oh man, if Zack Ryder wins, the United States Championship could end up on SmackDown, or if Rusev wins, the belt will stay on Raw. It could be something like that, where they kind of use that as kind of a teaser to get people to watch the pay-per-view. I'm not saying necessarily that will be the case, but I'm saying there's probably a decent bet that they'll probably advertise that a little bit after the draft happens next week. But now that we've kind of already decided and talked about who we think will be the number one overall picks in the draft, I have an interesting kind of thing for you. We've said, all right, these guys are good guys to kind of start a new brand with and kind of kick it off, and those are the guys you want to run with. But there's been kind of these rumors going around about NXT guys getting call-ups next week for this draft and being drafted, not even just coming up to the main roster, but being part of the draft. If that rumor ends up being true, or some of these guys get brought up, who do you think could be among that? And who do you think somebody like a Shane or a Stephanie, let's say they get the decisions, would want to target to help build a show that people are going to want to watch?
So who do I think would get called up or drafted from NXT?
Yeah. If NXT guys are included in the draft, who do you think what guy or girl do you think Shane or Stephanie would want to target to say, like, hey, these guys could be very valuable for my brand?
Finn Balor.
And why Finn Balor?
Because Finn, he's with this match with Nakamura, that's pretty much his send-off, in my opinion. I think that makes sense. And then there's nothing left for him to do down there. And he's hot. He keeps teasing being called up. And he really, is at that point where if he shows up on a Raw or SmackDown, it's going to be a big deal.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you in the sense of his Nakamura match, which airs tomorrow night, as of us recording this, will be his kind of send-off. I'm sure he'll do, because I don't know if that was the last episode that was taped for NXT at the last tapings. It might have been. So I'm not sure if he did anything after that, if anything's been taped for after that. But yeah, I think it's perfect timing. It's the Wednesday before the draft. It's against the guy that's essentially going to take the torch and be the guy that everybody looks to for NXT.
Do you think that?
Nakamura?
Because there's been talks about bringing Nakamura up.
I don't think Nakamura is coming up anytime soon. I mean,
he's already working with WWE talent on these house shows they had in Japan.
But it's Japan.
But what does that mean? He's still working the WWE talent. I think that means that they've got confidence in him enough to bring him to the main roster.
Confidence enough, yes, but he was working guys like Chris Jericho.
But that means what?
Chris Jericho can work with anybody.
But there are a lot of guys on the main roster who could work with anybody.
They're not going to go to Hawaii and Japan, where people know about Nakamura, and they're going to pay to see Nakamura and have him not on the show, and they're not going to have him face some guy from NXT just for the sake of, well, we don't want you wrestling. They know what Nakamura can do. They've seen him in the ring. They know how good he is. Because when he had that one match in Orlando on the house show at Amway recently, it was all NXT guys. It was Aries, Joe, and Balor, and it was a tag match. I don't think Nakamura working a house show in Japan has anything to do with where he's going on the main roster. I think that is simply for the fact that you're going to Japan, you have to utilize one of your biggest Japanese stars, especially when Hideo Itami was not there to do it either. Because if Hideo hadn't gotten injured last year, that's probably his spot as well on that tour. I don't think Nakamura's coming up anytime soon. I'm still under the belief that him and Joe is your NXT TakeOver main event in Brooklyn. Whether or not he wins that match over Joe is another story, but I think it's certainly possible that Nakamura is your next champion. I think Samoa Joe, not coming up in the draft, but I think Samoa Joe, it has a better chance of coming up in the next few months over Nakamura.
So you don't think the possibility of Joe getting drafted being like a Kevin Owens and having the title on the show for a little while, and then at SummerSlam, or not SummerSlam, TakeOver, before SummerSlam, loses the belt, and that's his NXT farewell?
Well, as we've already seen, him losing the belt won't be his farewell because he's got to get the rematch. Which is what.
But you know what I'm saying. You know where I'm coming from with that.
Yes, I understand what you're saying. And I think that's going to happen with Bayley once. I think she's going to get a rematch with Asuka at NXT TakeOver Brooklyn. I think that's kind of what they're setting up to with these matches against Nia Jax and Alexa Bliss, where she's kind of proving, all right, I'm knocking out all my competitors. I want my rematch against Asuka. So I think it's kind of a situation like that too. Do I think Samoa Joe could pull Kevin Owens, come up, still be NXT champion? Yes, I think that works way better for a heel than it does for a face, because they're gonna you can come up and say, oh, well, I've already pretty much dominated NXT. I want to come up and see what I can do on Raw or on SmackDown now, considering they're two different brands. That's what Kevin Owens did. Well, they could certainly do something with that with Samoa Joe, where he could, end up losing the belt to Nakamura in August and, just stay up on the main roster like Owens. Will they do that? That's a different story. I don't think they're quite going to do that yet. I think Joe and Bayley are going to be kind of like that package deal where they both kind of come up at the same time, right around SummerSlam, maybe right after SummerSlam.
I think Bayley's going to come out the Raw after SummerSlam, truthfully.
She might even show up at SummerSlam.
That's also very possible.
But outside of Finn Balor, so we established Finn Balor. We both agree on Finn Balor. Who else from NXT do we think is coming up in this draft? I have one name. I have one name that really sticks out to me.
Being?
Nia Jax.
Nia Jax?
Yes. And I say that for the reason she had her match against Asuka for the belt, did not win. She lost her match against Bayley for the belt in England, and she just lost to Bayley. Not to say that she has nothing to do. There's still a lot she could learn and a lot she can kind of utilize from NXT. But I think Nia Jax is kind of a perfect kind of character right now for the women's division on Raw or on SmackDown, whereas she's this big monster, billed as a monster, sort of like they wanted to do with Karma years ago, but the whole pregnancy thing with that kind of ruined it. But where she's kind of like this unbeatable, kind of foe. And if she's not challenging for the belt in NXT right now, I don't think there's much of a need for her to be down there, especially with the crop of talent of women that is awaiting kind of their chance in NXT, like a Peyton Royce or Liv Morgan or any of those girls that have been kind of working house shows and everything else.
Okay, well, I don't disagree with you. I just don't think that Nia is truthfully ready for that call up. I think she needs some time to build a little bit more of a character, and do promo work, which I think was the gripe I had with Apollo Crews getting the call up when he did. But I don't think I would be surprised if Nia got drafted. But you want to talk about women down in NXT, I think Carmella might also be one to come up in some respects of this draft.
I think Carmella's a good one simply for the fact that, again, she's not really doing anything. And without Enzo and Cass, it just feels weird having them separated.
It does.
I think having Carmella with them right now would just do a lot for them. Not even so much because she's not even so much a great manager. I think it just adds to that whole dynamic of their character, having kind of that.
It feels really weird. It's like it's like when your significant other goes away on a business trip. It feels really just strange that one is somewhere and the other is somewhere completely different.
I'm surprised she didn't come up with them when they first came up. Honestly, I thought that was very strange.
Well, like when you saw on Breaking Ground, Triple H was talking about how Carmella has so much potential and that she needs to come into her own and be her own character. But I don't think.
I think
if you're going to do that, you're going to do that. You have to, give her a different entrance music. She can't be the female version of Enzo.
I mean, she does use a different entrance music, but I think her character.
But I mean, a music that's associated with Enzo and Cass, that kind of a thing. You kind of need to change her gimmick up a little bit, and they haven't done that. They've kept her Carmella, and it just feels weird.
Yeah, I mean, I think she's certainly a good candidate to come up simply for the fact that she's not really doing much on NXT, and I think her coming up with Enzo and Cass could really it would just benefit them both, I think, or all three of them, I guess I should say. How do you feel about now moving kind of out of the women's division? I know we talked about before, just in our general discussion about the draft. Will tag teams be selected together or will they be selected separately? I'm under the impression they'll be selected separately. But
I think you might see something happen where, and I think I know where you're going with this, with American Alpha, where, you'll see a trade for a spot happen. So then, like, they'll get 2 consecutive picks and they'll draft a tag team. Something like that might happen.
Or it could be a situation where you have these guys, say, on SmackDown next week. They do the draft. They each pick, say, 15 guys. Let's say 15. Just an ambiguous number that's, good for a draft. And then they say, all right, well, if you want to find out who goes where for the rest of this draft, check WWE.com for the rest of the draft results, as they'll be posted throughout the night like they've done in years past. And it could be a thing where, all right, they weren't selected necessarily, or after those certain picks, you're allowed to just pick tag teams because they kind of wanted to just, round out a roster and everything. So who knows? Or it could just be a thing where they're not technically picked separately on a show, but they could say, oh, well, Shane picked Chad Gable at one point, and then he said a few picks later, he's like, I can't have Chad without having Jason Jordan, so I could get American Alpha. It could be something like that. But I think it could be a situation where, like, yes, they're not included on, like, the draft that's shown on the show, but when they say go to WWE.com to check the rest of the results for later, they could be included in something like that. I think a lot of the tag teams will be, the Usos and everything else, because they're not going to be top quality picks. You're not going to pick tag teams.
Here's where the tag team thing comes into play. Every week they're talking about splitting up some team. Could Carl Anderson be on SmackDown and Doc Gallows go to Raw? Could 2 members of the New Day wind up on Raw and the other member go to SmackDown?
Yeah, they're teasing that.
Could the Wyatt family get split up? Could the Usos be here and there? Like, I think they're teasing it too much to the point where, one, there's going to be somebody split up. I think you might see the Usos get split.
I think if anybody's going to be split up, they're going to do it like they did before, where it's the Dudley Boys.
You might see the Dudleys get split, which would be fantastic.
Because I think Bubba Ray, as a singles guy,
that would be fantastic.
They could get a lot out of that. And there has been talks of possibly doing that because the Dudleys aren't really doing anything. And if you're going to have them, you might as well use them for something.
But like I said, I think they've been saying it too much for it not to happen. Plus,
I don't think you can break up the Usos, though. The Usos' character is basically that they're brothers and that they do everything together, and I don't think either Uso gets over. They are barely getting over as a tag team right now. I don't think either Uso gets over as a singles guy. I think
now is the time to reinvent the Usos. And we've seen it happen with other characters. We've seen guys who kind of fell off the wagon and then got a different gimmick or brought some kind of new life to their gimmick and came and completely turned themselves around. And I think that could benefit the Usos is a split. But I think, like I said, I think somebody's getting broken up.
Yeah, I think.
And if it even winds up being someone like the Social Outcast, I think it's happening.
No, don't break up one of the best things going in the tag division, please.
But yeah, I think you might also see some weird things happen where spots get traded, so people have consecutive picks and then pick a tag team.
Yeah,
or something along those lines.
Yeah, that could probably happen. I mean,
especially if you're going to call up a team.
I think
you can't call up one guy and be like, "Oh, well,
they're not going to do that."
You know, because their partner's left down at NXT, and then call him up. You know, the next 2 draft picks or something. You know.
No, I think the only team they're gonna actually call up is going to be American Alpha. I don't think there's any other team that's really ready to come up from NXT right now.
Well, aside from the tag team champions of Dash and Dawson, but
they're tag team champions.
But they're tag team champions, and then Then if you bring up 2 teams, the tag team division down in NXT is slim to none. So, I don't think there's going to be more than one team, if any teams, called up from NXT. But not to harp too much longer on NXT, what about the possibility of surprise returns for the draft?
Anybody?
Well, we already know that Tajiri has been said to have signed a new contract.
To stay on after the Cruiserweight Classic.
To stay on after the Cruiserweight Classic.
Yeah.
But let's talk like the likes of maybe like a Kurt Angle or something along those lines.
I'm giving up all hope on Kurt Angle coming back to WWE in any wrestling capacity at this point. It doesn't sound like WWE really has any interest in him coming back to wrestle. These rumors have been running rampant for God knows how long now, and just nothing's coming of them. And now a lot of the rumors that are coming out from Meltzer and everybody else has said recently that WWE has no real interest in Kurt Angle at the moment. So I'm going to rule out any Kurt Angle possibility of him showing up next Tuesday or within the next month or even by the end of the year. I'm going to rule that out just out of personal belief. I don't think that's happening. There's been talks of them wanting to bring back a lot of kind of mid-card-ish guys for the sake of helping put some of these newer guys over. And a couple of names I've seen thrown around. One of them was Jimmy Wang Yang.
Yeah, he was backstage at WWE, and apparently he got something going on. He tweeted about it.
Probably not as Jimmy Wang Yang. Well, probably as Jimmy Wang Yang. So that's a name that's kind of been thrown around that I've seen. It was kind of random, but the idea behind bringing these guys back, and this has been stressed numerous times, is bringing them back for the sake of helping put guys over.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like the Dudleys did when they came in, where they were putting tag teams over. They were putting the Wyatt family over, not to come in and, just for nostalgia kind of sake, not for the sake of actually becoming a champion. And I don't know necessarily if I like that. That would only be to fill roster spots, honestly, which I don't necessarily think they need to do. But if they feel that that's necessary, who am I to stop them?
Yeah. I wonder what would the likes of like seeing maybe a Shelton Benjamin come back or something like that happening would be.
I would be completely on board with a Shelton Benjamin return, but he's one of those guys, again, I just don't see it happening. I don't think you're going to get anybody big like that.
I wouldn't say Shelton Benjamin is necessarily big.
He's a big return. He's a multiple-time tag team champion, multiple-time Intercontinental champion, held the U.S. title a couple times. That's a pretty big name, not Jimmy Wang Yang or Kurt Hawkins or somebody who really never did anything. I mean, when you think of Jimmy Wang Yang, you think of the Asian Cowboy. When you think of Shelton Benjamin, you think of the great matches he had against Triple H, how he went over him, and was a multiple-time Intercontinental champion who did all these crazy spots in ladder matches. There's actually like something that people would be hyped and would look forward to with that. I don't think Jimmy Wang Yang brings something like that, and I don't think any of the guys that they're going to bring back are going to be, Tajiri maybe, but we don't have a confirmation on that yet, so we don't even know if that's actually going to happen.
Yeah, I'm a little lost at where to go from here with this discussion. If there's anything you think you could add, or any questions you have that we haven't discussed yet,
let's kind of take this forward a little bit, because we've kind of talked about SummerSlam, and judging by, you know, what our kind of thoughts are on the draft, who's going to go where, why don't we kind of say, like, you know, not so much what do you think the SummerSlam card is going to be, but knowing that SummerSlam is going to be the first pay-per-view that they're going to use to build this brand split, so to speak, and it's going to be a joint show, how do you think it's going to kind of play out? Obviously, you're probably going to have a match, you know, between two guys for the SmackDown title and two guys for the Raw title, or three guys, whatever it ends up being. But do you think they're going to do this thing where it's like, okay, we're going to see, you know, do you think that's going to be the first pay-per-view where it's all SmackDown matches and all Raw matches? Or do you think they might have crossover because it is still a crossover pay-per-view and they could say, oh, man, the belts could go anywhere at this point? How do you think they're going to handle SummerSlam, basically, without predicting the card?
I'm interested to see how they handle Battleground with the draft happening right before it. Because you've got a lot of matches on that card that very possibly could split up feuds or very possibly split up even tag teams. I think, like you said, it's very interesting to see that the tag team titles are not on the line at Battleground. And what happens if the tag team champions are drafted to different shows? Can that even happen? Is that allowed? And whatnot. I think it's especially interesting to see what happens between AJ and Cena, because I don't think that that's the final match they're going to have. And I think if they get drafted to the same show, awesome, great, that makes sense. They have a match at SummerSlam. If one gets drafted to Raw, one gets drafted to SmackDown, where does that payoff match come in?
And that is an interesting point. And then you also have the idea that, you know, Sasha's got to get her title match at some point. Wait, is she getting it at Battleground?
I think that's the setup right now, based off what happened on Raw last night.
Yeah,
they have a match on SmackDown. I'm pretty sure that's what's going to happen at the pay-per-view.
But you have to think Charlotte's not going to be champion much longer. Just out of, you know, sake of she's almost been a champion a year. I don't think, not to say that they're, you know, they don't want her to be champion, but I think just kind of, all right, it's time to give it to somebody new. Sasha's on a roll. I think Sasha's definitely going to get that win soon. So you got to wonder, you know, once we kind of find out what happens with Battleground and like what happens with the championships, like women's titles going where, tag titles going where, is there going to be more than one, you know, that kind of situation. You kind of, you know, I think that will change a lot of things, but I think Sasha is a good bet to probably win the belt at SummerSlam. There's been a lot of talks in the past about maybe Enzo and Cass winning the tag titles off New Day, but see, a lot of these rumors came before the brand split. So I think there's so many things that are kind of up in the air that it's like, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to handle it? And are some of these rumors that we're seeing kind of hints towards who might end up on what brand with each other? Maybe, if you want to read into it that much, it's certainly possible.
Yeah, there's a lot that's still completely left up to speculation, and a lot that's not very clear. Even things that should have been cleared up by the WWE already.
Well, I don't know if it should have been. I like kind of like that suspense because it keeps people guessing and like wanting to tune in.
It gets you to tune in. But I mean, like, it should have already been announced that when the split happens, if there's going to be one title or if there's going to be two titles, or, you know, kind of explaining how the draft picks are going to work or how they're going to determine the first draft pick.
Well, remember, we still have Raw before the draft.
True. But this coming Raw is going to be announced the general managers.
Well, I'm sure they'll clue us in on some things. But I don't agree with the fact that they should have said if there will or will not be a second title on, say, SmackDown or Raw, because then that kind of, you know, then you're kind of like, well, it kind of takes you out of the whole idea of like, oh, where's the WWE champion going to go? How's this handle? Oh, or, you know, like it kind of takes.
Or you could just be along the lines of, oh yeah, once the brand split happens, there's going to be two titles, but to determine which show gets which titles will come out of the main event of the pay-per-view.
They're going to handle it like they have in drafts past, where it's, you know, oh, well, our champion got drafted to this show. We don't have a champion. Let's have, you know, Battle Royal to say who's going to do this or who's going to do that. And it's like, you know, it kind of adds that extra storyline. So you don't want to spoil that before it happens, because then you can kind of build a story off of that, and even take existing storylines, like I said with John Cena and AJ Styles, and build that into a storyline revolving around the title. And I think that kind of benefits them by not announcing that.
That's a great point you make there, Dan. But on that note, we're going to end this episode of the Deep Six podcast. Don't forget to come back in just about 2 weeks, right after the Battleground pay-per-view event, where Dan and I will give you the rundown of that show as well as our opinions on it. We'll also go over our predictions from this show, see what went right, what went wrong. We'll also get a chance to see who went where in the WWE draft. In the meantime, don't forget to subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play Music, or Stitcher Radio. You can find us on all 3 of those platforms by searching The Deep Six Podcast. Also, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Deep Six Podcast, all spelled out one word. Dan, do you want to let them know where they can find you on Twitter and Instagram?
At D_Spivak.
And you can find me at Steven_Spivak. And please, if you like this show, please share it with your friends, your family, your coworkers, anyone and everyone you can think of. Your word of mouth helps us get this show to become bigger than what it is now, and without you, we can't do that. Until next time, I'm Steven. For Dan, this is the Deep Six Podcast. Have a good one.